Thank you, audience. Welcome back, Roblive. Jim, I love that intro because it means we're going to get to talk to somebody amazing today. How you feeling?
I'm good, man. Hey, do you know what I just thought of earlier was I think we're in our 1 year anniversary-ish. I think we're around that same time. I don't have a date, but it's around Christmas.
You're right. No, I think Christmas, Friendsgiving, Christmas was our first episode. We're bringing a cake. Next time we're cutting the cake with our viewers, okay? Thank you guys for sticking with us for a year. Thank you, Jim, for reminding us of that. And Jim has a gift that he's been asking for recently. I know a lot of people are really shy and say, I don't want anything. He wants something for Christmas, and you guys can give it to him. We're looking for 1,000 subscribers before, Lil Jon, by 2025, which means you guys have about 2 weeks, a week and a half to get to work. Make that happen for Jim here, okay?
Yep, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, DJ. Well, anyway, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about mental health. I know I talk about it a lot. I know you guys have seen the lime green wristband, and I will address that again for those who are new viewers. By the way, welcome. If it's your first time checking out Roblive. But I want to talk about it because it's so important today with our guest, Mr. Dallas Poore. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
Audience, say hi to Dallas. And before we get started, I just want to tell a brief background story about how we met. Viewers, if any of you have a cat out there, we were brought together by a feline. So my daughter's playing softball. I don't know if you know the backstory.
A little bit.
My daughter's playing softball, and she's struggling this last year. She lost her starting position. You know, and that happens. You're right, players come in. It's a travel team. It's competitive. And so she's a little bummed about that. She's having a hard time getting through the season. So I said, hey, keep your head up. You know, we don't quit. Let's keep going. And I wanted to give her an incentive. And I go, what would you like to earn at the end of the season? And of all the things, she's like, I want a cat. I'm like, we have 2 dogs. We have another cat. Are you sure? She goes, I want a cat, Dad. I said, all right, whatever keeps her going. So I promised her a cat. She gets through the season. And sure enough, she's like, okay, can we go pick up my cat now? We go down to the local shelter in Lemoore. We get there, and there's just this vibrant soul who you can tell loves animals. And I said, let's go to the expert. We're looking for a cat who gets along with dogs. And the gal who helped us out says, oh, I know a cat who thinks he's a dog. I go, that's the one. So she introduced me to this beautiful cat named Lenny. She said the backstory was he used to be called Lucifer, but they thought, they're probably not going to adopt the Lucifer, so we're going to switch his name. They changed it up to Lenny, and I guess he was a real favorite at the place there, and that was Sarah Jackman.
Oh, there you go.
Sarah.
Right.
And your connection to Sarah?
Well, she's my girlfriend.
There you go. So I'm talking to Sarah, and check this out, Jim. This was the coolest part. There's fees, right, to adopt, and shots, everything, and every now and then they have kind of a scholarship thing for, I guess, animals that are difficult to adopt or nobody really, is looking at. And so we get through all the paperwork, and I've got my debit card out ready to just, bite the bullet on another dog. I mean, it's going to a good cause. And at the end of it all, Sarah says, your cat was already sponsored. I said, come again? What sponsor? What does that mean? It's yours.
That's great.
I was like, what? Yeah. Can we do a yeah? So anyway, we met, and then as we were doing the paperwork, finishing up, we get to talking about, I think, the podcast and different things. And she says, well, my boyfriend, he's got a foundation, a nonprofit, and he's doing some really great things, and I'd love for you to meet him. And so we continued to text, and then she connected me to you, and today we want to hear about this amazing work that you're doing. And so thank you for being on the show. Thank you for traveling.
Thank you. This is great, man. The fog made it interesting, like I said. So,
So I want to start from the beginning, and I always do this. Jim loves this part. It's his favorite part. Your origin story. We always think that everybody has a story, but that story starts somewhere, and we're shaped by, our environment early on in life. So I believe you said you were from Iowa.
yeah. Well, depends how far back you want me to go. I think I'll start at like my teenage years.
Yes.
For everybody's sanity, but so small town Iowa guy.
Is there corn like?
There's a lot of corn.
So that's real.
That's about all there is.
Have you been out there, Jim?
Lots
Iowa?
and lots of corn.
I know you travel a lot.
Yeah.
Did you see the cornfields?
Through it. Oh, well, everything over there is corny.
So I'm assuming that watching Children of the Corn, if you're from Iowa, is a different experience.
I haven't seen it, so Horror movies they're not scary, so I don't.
You're like, whatever.
That's not my thing.
Okay,
I
so
just laugh. But yeah, grew up in Villisca, Iowa, and
shout out to
small
Villisca.
farm town. We had about 1,100 people, and not a whole lot going on there. Really, really good people there. And, having moved up here to Central California about a year ago, one of the things that really appeals to me here is how much similarity I see between the work ethic and the character of people here in this area. Back to my hometown.
Oh, really?
It really reminds me of small town Iowa in the middle of California. So that's been a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
And San Diego, quite a bit different.
Oh, is that where you were?
Yeah, that's where I've been the last 20 years. So.
He went San Diego for 20 years, and he came to Central California. We're going to have a strong reason for this move.
Well, there's a number of reasons for the move, not the least of which is the foundation and this woman named Sarah.
Yes, Sarah.
So they're definitely connected. This is the perfect spot to launch a foundation like mine, like ours. From the standpoint of there's national parks, which are great for mental health.
Yeah, we don't, you know what? We take that for granted sometimes. Don't you think, Jim? We should go more often as locals.
Absolutely.
I'm not even going to tell you how long it's been for Yosemite.
We're going to fix that.
When was yours?
Podcast in Yosemite.
Yeah. I mean, McKinley was 3, so
yeah, we just take it for granted.
Maybe 15 years, yeah.
And you know what the eye opener is when you go to these national parks, right? Living locally, you always run into people from like Switzerland and Germany and Chile, and you're like, "What are you guys doing here?" Oh, that's right. This is a big deal. We're just the local bumpkins who aren't really like recognizing that. So I wanted you to go back a little bit. You said you were in high school, small town, nothing to do. At some point, it crosses your mind that maybe you're going to enter the military.
Yeah, that was to escape the small town.
Okay.
Pretty much, if I'm being honest.
Were you always like? Did you come from a lineage of military?
Well, there was some
members?
military service in my family. Nobody that I'm real close to by any means, but I'm definitely not the first.
Okay.
I'm not real close to that side of my family that served. So I kind of thought I was the first in some ways.
Yeah, felt like it.
I definitely chose my own path. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
And the Marine Corps seemed logical to me. I had gotten some Toys for Tots as a kid, so that was kind of an easy selection process for me. Like, oh yeah, I like their uniforms, and they gave me toys when I was little.
That was the thought process.
That was pretty much my thought process.
And I get out of town.
And I get out of town, and these are tough guys. I wanted to be a tough guy, so I figured if the Marine Corps can do that for me, it's a good choice. So that was pretty much my selection process right
So
there.
right after graduation, or did you wait a little bit?
So I kind of had a interesting journey with basically when I was getting ready to graduate from high school, I hadn't really chosen a college. I didn't have a whole lot of direction about what I was trying to do. I knew I wanted to kind of get out of where I was and go see the world and explore and be a free spirit and whatever. And so I was kind of planning on going the community college route. And basically there's one very relevant part of this story. I'm glad you asked me that question. So my tipping point on deciding to go to college was I said, if I get a memorial scholarship for my friend that happened to have committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
Then I will go to college.
This was in high school?
This is in high school. Yeah. Wow. So that obviously ties into what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I didn't think I would get it. And I thought, man, I can say this and I won't have any repercussions. I won't get it. And then I ended up getting it. I'm like, I got to go to college now. But I really had no ambitions to go to college. That was kind of I didn't feel ready for it. I was not what I would call an academic all-star by any stretch. Slight problem with authority to go on top of it. And I was kind of a maniac. But as it turned out, I got that scholarship, and it really was a surprise. And about that time, my parents were, they were nudging me to look at other options as far as scholarships and grants and those kinds of things. And we didn't have a lot of money laying around by any means. And so I ended up getting scholarships for football, choir, and leadership. And
wow, so you were very active in high school.
I was in a lot of different things. jack of all trades, I guess. And so,
what was your position in football? We all played.
So I went in as a kicker.
Oh, okay.
And when I showed up to our first practice in college, I was the one of 4 kickers. In high school, I was the only kicker. So all of a sudden, I'm like, he's just one of them,
Yeah.
And so pretty soon after I got there, I'm like, I don't want to do I want to do something else. So
yeah, 1 of 4.
So I wanted to put some hits on people and stuff. So I ended up getting keep my scholarship being a D-back, not a good one, but I got to keep the scholarship on people, so that was good.
What was your college?
Graceland University. So it was Graceland College. Now they call it Graceland University. And
I'm thinking of Elvis for some reason.
Everybody says that. So it's actually an RLDS school, which is Latter-day Saints. And,
okay.
So I wasn't very well behaved by their standards. So that was a challenge for me.
That was the rebellious side.
I was a little rebellious, and I liked to party back then. So that was the reason I wanted to get out of there just as much as any other reason. But once I joined the Marine Corps, that school was no longer that viable because I wanted to be around other Marines. And
yeah.
So I was there for 2 years, and I went to Iowa State after that.
Oh, okay.
And before I went to Iowa State,
is that the Buckeyes or not the Buckeyes, the Cyclones?
Yeah.
What's the other?
Everybody gets Iowa, Idaho, and Ohio mixed up.
Is that what I?
And we're all
I'm picturing
corn, Cyclones, Buckeyes, Hawkeye.
Buckeye, Hawkeye. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, you're right, Hawkeye. We do get them confused.
It's all good. But yeah, I basically after my I went and worked at a church camp after my freshman year in college, and that was my summer job, just trying to make some money.
Did you grow up in the church, or?
Yeah, so I grew up Presbyterian, and then kind of, I say in college actually, I kind of switched over to Methodist, but I was always kind of Protestant, or non-denominational.
Yeah.
And so I'm at this church camp. I'm a counselor and doing some maintenance stuff and things along those lines. And next thing you know, I'm like, okay, I've got my freshman year in college behind me. I'm not really enjoying college. I enjoyed the football. I enjoyed the choir. But college itself, I really didn't want to do it. So then I started looking seriously about enlisting in the Marine Corps. And my parents caught wind of that, and they're like, with your authority problems, I don't know how we feel about this. They're going to kill you. And, I'm like, no, I'm tough. I can do whatever I want. And for all intents and purposes, they bribed me to go to college for another year with a truck that I was driving that was theirs. They said, you can keep the truck. It was like $1,000 Tacoma, or little piece of junk.
It was enough.
But it was enough, yeah. So went back to school for another year, and the promise that I made them was I will not enlist until I finish another year of school. So I'm in school for like a month, and I find out about the Marine Corps officer program where you don't have to enlist, but what you're signing for is 4.5 weeks that you have to go to training, and you can drop after 4.5 weeks with no further commitment.
That sounds like a deal.
Yeah, so it was a loophole. So I'm like, I wanted to be a Marine so bad I could taste it, So I didn't even really know what an officer was. I just knew that it made it so I could be a Marine faster in theory,
Yeah.
I wanted that title. So went to OCS, and I told my parents I outsmarted you, and here's how. And they went, oh, you're going to be an officer. I went, yeah, I guess. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so a few months, less than a year later, I'm heading off to OCS, and the process has started. Let the torture begin.
Boot camp.
Yeah. So
is boot camp? Was it? What year was this? The 90s.
It would have been 98. Summer in 98.
Okay. So is boot camp? From what I've heard, early on, I don't know, Jim, if you remember Full Metal Jacket, right? That's our boot camp in our head, right?
Yeah.
They put their hands on you. They're really rough. Is that accurate in any way for your experience?
That was accurate back in the Vietnam era.
Yeah.
At this point, if they put their hands on you at this point, they're going to get in trouble.
Just a lot of yelling, though.
A lot of yelling, a lot of
harassment. A lot of mind games.
But it's not what it used to be. The parents have gotten heavily involved with when things have happened. People have gotten hurt. Next thing you know, politicians are getting involved. So they've really gotten rid of a lot of those things. But they still find ways to make your life miserable, but so I kind of bypassed boot camp. I didn't go to boot camp. I went to officer candidate school, which is a very different
experience,
kind of environment experience. Yeah.
Wow.
it's just, it sucks in different ways, basically. They're looking for reasons to kick you out because you want to be there, where at boot camp, they're finding ways to keep you there.
Yes.
Even if you're broken. OCS, you get broken, they're like, okay, see ya, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a totally different approach.
So, yeah.
So you get through that, and then at what point do you choose what your focus is going to be in terms of serving?
So that's kind of a complicated question. So depending on what program you go through, I went through something called Platoon Leaders Class, which is a split program. You go through juniors and you go through seniors, 6 weeks and 6 weeks with 1 year of college between. And then you get your commission after you graduate from college, assuming your GPA is high enough, which I just barely made it, but I made it.
What you need, a 3.0?
2.
A 2. You need a 2.
No, it was a 2 or 2.5. Regardless, I made it. I think it was 2. I know I was very nervous until I graduated, but thankfully I was able to.
So you made it your 4 years of college, or congratulations.
Thanks.
I thought this story was going to end like after the freshman year. I'm sorry.
No, well, so the thing was, once I had gone through OCS, like if I had failed out of college, I wouldn't have gotten to be a Marine. I would have had to go back to boot camp, and I already had that.
The other way.
Yeah, like I made it through juniors. I'm like, okay, I made it through that, so then I got to make it through another year of school so I can go to seniors and become a Marine, and so that was really the push that I needed to finish school.
Yeah,
was I get to be a lieutenant at the end of this.
That is a real
if I didn't
cool
have
deal.
that, I don't know if I would have finished college, honestly.
Yeah. So you make it, you graduate, and then right away you're serving.
Yeah, so basically you pin on lieutenant bars, you go to Quantico, Virginia, and you're there for 6 months for something called the Basic School, which is, a leadership academy. It's 6 months of very intensive infantry-focused leadership training. So you've got a mixture of, you've got tactics on paper, you go out to the field, you're doing weapon stuff, you're doing jumping in helicopters, jumping in Humvees, firing machine guns, throwing grenades, rifle range time. And by the time you leave Quantico after the end of 6 months, you've been to the FBI Academy for MOUT training, military operations on urban terrain. So, going through cities, kicking in doors, that kind of stuff. And, you've had a pretty good exposure to real world combat scenarios. And by the time you are graduating from there, you're trained up to company level tactics. So 3 platoons worth. So about 150 Marines you're ready to lead in combat when you leave that place.
Wow, I can't
ready
imagine.
Is a loose term.
Yeah.
You're trained in theory to be able to do these things. But
I want to share something with our viewers real quick, because this is a term that I think gets misinterpreted unless you've really been a part of it. Jim, you can probably attest to this as well. When we talk about ready, right, as adult men who've been through a lot of scenarios where we were supposed to be ready, I think that the younger audience who maybe hasn't experienced that, all right, go out there and do it. I don't know if we ever feel 100% ready. I feel like we've got the training and we've got the knowledge, but it's that courage to take it on. Jim, I know you talked once about getting thrown in front of the classroom your first day as a teacher, right? And you're like, oh my God, I'm supposed to, right?
They never ended. They kept coming and coming and coming. I was like, oh my gosh.
And to another complete degree, and I always think about the military because I grew up on movies, right? And they do their best to try to create a depiction. I always look at the veterans and say, hey, how accurate was this? And when we talk about ready, I always in my mind go, what would I feel like having to go into live combat where my life is at stake and all I have to rely on is my weapon and my brothers, sisters around me? Would I be ready? And I read once, and I want you to help me with this. There's a guy named Charlie Trujillo who I really want you to meet one day. He's done a documentary, Soldados, through PBS, and he talks about the Mexican-American experience in Vietnam. I'm going to actually give you a copy of the book. Charlie, I'm pushing the book, and he talks about in the book how you have these different responses to live combat that you won't know until it happens.
Yeah.
And he says there's always the big talker who in boot camp and on the way and through the practice. Man, I can't wait to get out there. I'm just going to take this, bull by the horns. And then you have other guys who are just kind of quiet and pensive. And then you have some who are a little bit, just very passive and apprehensive. And you have all these assumptions about how they're going to be when real bullets start flying over your head. And he says, it's never who you think it is. He said some of these big talkers in boot camp, he recalls seeing them, huddled in the fetal position, as bullets flew by, crying. And some of these other more passive, this survival instinct just kicks in and they become, fight or flight. Did you feel that to be an accurate experience once you're out there?
You definitely can't know how you're going to react.
You just can't predict.
There's no way you can prepare yourself for what that's really going to feel like until you're living it.
Yeah.
And, you and I had a quick phone call on the way up here, and I was, sharing some of my leadership journey with confidence and things like that. And I'm very open about these things because what I'm doing through the foundation is encouraging other veterans to open up more
Be
and talk to each other.
Yeah.
So I can share these things without embarrassment because, I've got to lead by example.
Yeah.
So, I'll just speak to my own experience. And there are so many different flavors of combat. I mean, layers, whatever you want to call them. There's kicking indoors, there's indirect fire, there's drones now. There's so many different kinds of combat. So that's a term that gets convoluted very quickly. And you'll get, a guy who was kicking in doors in Baghdad arguing with a guy that was dodging bombs in Kuwait, even though they're on the same team. And it's a really weird phenomenon in the military. I don't like it. It bothers me because I'm like, dude, we were both getting shot at the same time. Like, why do we have to say which is worse or better?
Yes.
So that's something else. I try to kind of get rid of some of those things. But to answer your question, for me, I had my own journey with confidence as a leader. I went through all the training and, you talk about being ready.
Yeah.
I get to Camp Pendleton, and did I feel ready to lead Marines? I felt trained to lead Marines. I was like the teacher on the first day of school, except for I'm surrounded by trained killers.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So there's definitely a difference between trained and ready. And I think for me, I was smart enough to know what I didn't know. And I was willing to go, okay, yeah, I've got bars on my shoulders. That means I get saluted. It doesn't mean I know anything. Let's just talk this out. Like, what do you expect of me? What do I expect of you? That kind of thing. So I felt ready to lead. I had a lot to learn, and I kind of tried to be a sponge and learned as much as I could from the guys. As far as combat specifically, I spent a lot of time getting myself ready, and we all have our own ways of doing that because nobody wants to go to war to be the guy that's, and when I say guy, I mean men, women, everybody's involved now. Nobody wants to be the soldier, Marine, airman, whatever, that's jumping in the trench in the fetal position, not doing their part.
Yes.
So we all try to prepare ourselves mentally to go into battle in our own ways. And that's something I spent a lot of time doing. The moment I found out we were probably going to be going to war soon, I definitely started preparing myself mentally in some pretty intense ways. I'll spare the listeners on some of those ways, but let's just say I wanted to be ready, and I took that very seriously. So just mental preparedness, I'll leave it at that. There's some training things that we went through in that 6-month period that I kind of defaulted back to, and whether it's reading or watching certain things or whatever, I wanted to be ready. So I kind of reinitiated those things. But in combat was the first time I knew that the training that I had been through really worked pretty well. The first time I felt like truly a leader was dodging Scud missiles.
Oh my!
That's when I felt like, okay, I can do this. Like, because the moment I knew that my Marines' lives were in danger, everything kicked. Like everything kicked in, like clicked, whatever I'm trying to say. it just made sense. And I remember having this moment of clarity, this epiphany in my brain that just went, lead. And like,
you felt their eyes on you. Like,
yeah. And
what are we
I got
doing,
a picture
Captain?
I can share with you that's very intense. And it's not our first time getting shot at, but it's very indicative of what it felt like. But basically, we're in a chemical weapons environment, and we had been doing these workups or drills to prepare for, okay, after this line in the sand, after 1,700 hours on this date, if you hear these sirens, it means we're actually getting bombed. So we knew at that point, like, okay, fun time's over at this point.
Where location-wise?
So we were in northern Kuwait, Ali Al Salam, and we were there for the invasion of Iraq, which I believe is March 2003. The days kind of blur together in an environment like that. I got there February 10th. I was advance party for my unit, so when we show up, I was actually with a different unit, and we got the SEALs laying out there on dune buggies, sunning themselves, and getting ready to kick things off. And a few weeks later, the announcement was made, and shock and awe and all that starts happening. So
when you say that, you know how you said the SEALs were out there sunning themselves? I see this in the movie, and again, I want to verify this for the reality. It seems like the longer you're out there in combat, the more you're capable of compartmentalizing to some degree. We're like, okay, we're not getting shot at today, so we're going to go play football, or we're going to party or whatever. And I was always like, wait, what? Because I feel like I would be the guy to still remain tense and anxious about what just happened, rather than just go play some touch ball.
Well, and to be clear, when I said that, I said it a little bit tongue in cheek, but they were actually out there doing exactly what I said, but we hadn't started combat operations yet.
Yeah.
So they're just they got a lot of downtime, and they're just got
but even then, knowing that the combat's coming, I don't know. I just think I'm an overthinker maybe, but I'm there, worked up, ready to, I can't do any downtime stuff. Is that do you think that that's a coping mechanism to just play football the day before you hit the battle? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did you see that a lot?
I mean, everybody's got their own experience.
Yeah.
Every unit's got their own function. Every individual Marine soldier, whatever, has their own mentality about it.
Yeah.
For me, I know right now, excuse me, some of the things we talked about on the way up here, my lack of sleep. I refused to sleep because I didn't want to be asleep when certain things were going on. Because I'm like, okay, well, I'm an officer. I'm supposed to be, I've got this leadership position, responsibilities. I was afraid I was going to miss out on some of the important decisions that were being made. So I would just stay up for days on end until I finally got in trouble for it. And then they said in no uncertain terms, go get your sleep. And I'm like, it's 115 degrees. What do you want from me? I can't sleep. And they're like, okay, well, go do this. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, for me, I was basically a workaholic in a combat zone because I felt like I needed to be in the middle of everything all the time. But that was just me. That's just.
Do you feel like that's the way you approach life as well?
Oh, that's a tough question. You shouldn't ask me that. Because I try not to be a workaholic. Sometimes I do have that.
The reason I asked that one because I was listening to you and Jim talk. Jim, I don't know if you noticed this, but he rattled off about 5 major projects or jobs that he's doing right now, and I was like, wow.
Were you talking about Jim or me?
No, Jim was talking to you, and you were telling him, okay, I've got the series, I've got the podcast, because Jim was trying to nail down what you do. And he couldn't because you had 5 different things. He was like, so you're a podcaster. Well, I've got that, but I'm also a screenwriter. I also do voiceover. Well, I also have a nonprofit. And then we're like, okay, what does he do? It looks like everything.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting couple of years. I'll just say that.
It's exciting.
I didn't expect any of this. So yeah.
So you go through the combat, you go through that experience, and now you're back home. At what point are you done with the combat and now trying to reacclimate to the world?
So 2003 was our world tour, we call it. So basically, we were there for roughly 3-4 months in country. We had 27 helicopters, Had one total loss in combat. Lost 2 Marines on that one. So went over 27 helicopters, came back with 26. All of them had battle damage. So basically, we came back when we couldn't fly our helicopters anymore. They were all shot to Kingdom Come.
Wow.
So that says something about the time period we were over there.
Yeah.
And so we come back to CONUS, and we transfer these aircraft to another squadron that was none too happy to be getting nothing but bullet-ridden helicopters, because that meant they couldn't fly very much, and they were real mad at us. So we were we're back in the U.S. for about a month, and then we redeployed to Okinawa, Australia, and the Philippines. I skipped the Philippines, but Okinawa and Australia, those were 2 pretty good spots. Okinawa, to answer your question, was a really good, I don't know. I did a lot of exploration of the island. I took up photography over there. I took up scuba diving, and those were things that kind of helped me work through whatever combat residuals I had going on.
Yeah.
Sleep was a really big problem for me.
Even then.
Well, in the U.S., after combat, I didn't sleep great, but I don't really remember, to be honest with you, how my sleep was then. But Okinawa, fast forward a few months and my sleep was shot. I couldn't sleep to save my life. And so that's when I realized I needed to do something to address that.
Was that the first sign that maybe you had, what was it, PTSD or?
I mean, there's so many different labels that can be slapped on these things.
Yeah.
So it could be insomnia, it could be anxiety, it can be PTSD, it can be depression. There's so many different labels they can throw on those things. And again, going to the mini-series part of that, that's the things we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Is differentiating and showing the commonalities. Like the relationship between anxiety and depression is one that a lot of people don't understand. And when I really got to where I understood it, I'm like, it makes all the sense in the world. But at the time when you're going through it, you're like, well, am I depressed or am I anxious, and which one and why? And
I need to see that. I
really
really do.
It's
I'm going to pull up
very
some of your
interesting
quotes.
psychology, learning that.
This is what you said. You said at some point you struggled with depression. Was that Okinawa or was that after?
The main thing that I dealt with on a long-term basis was my sleep. Depression started to hit me later, and I would say there were a few things that contributed to my depression, but not the least of which was I kept losing Marines to suicide and things on American soil.
Yes.
And that was just something I couldn't, what's the word I'm looking for? I couldn't reconcile.
Yeah.
Getting these guys home safely and then losing them here.
Yes.
That, it did everything from piss me off to make me sad to, all sorts of different things.
I think, and for me, because I was going to share very briefly, the first person that I had known had taken his life was my stepfather a long time ago. I didn't have a whole lot of time to get to know him on a personal level because I was away at college. Mm-hmm. But that was the first person that I suicide took his life, and he was in the Navy, right? And that was the first time I was like trying to make that correlation between what experience he had been through and how that might connect to the mental health. But then I had a vice principal, and then he became our principal, and I was very close to him. I knew him well. So that was the first person that had taken their life that I knew on a very close relationship basis. And I remember having to go to therapy immediately after that. Was that something that you sought as well? Or did you kind of try to figure it out on your own?
I tried to figure it out on my own for a long time, in all sorts of different ways. And I'll tell you right now, the reason I'm running a foundation is because I went through all sorts of different things to get myself right. And then I'm going, okay, now that I'm finally through all those things, and now that I finally feel like I'm close to resembling whole again, I should let other people not have to go through what I just had to go through to get to where I am now.
Amen.
So it kind of felt like self-imposed pressure, like, make the world better here, dude. Like, you had to work really hard to get here. like save them some trouble.
Yes. We need more people like you.
Thank you for that.
You had another quote here that kind of stuck with me, and it said, we lived the things that other people have nightmares about. And, Jim, we weren't in the military, but we can all relate to that awful feeling right after you wake up from a nightmare, right? There's that sense of like, oh my God, that was bad, and the sweating stuff. But then we get that moment where we go, thankfully, that was just a dream. I can't imagine what it would be like when it wasn't a dream and it all actually happened. And that's what you go through, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds kind of funny to say it that way, but so little fun fact about that video that you were talking about. I did the monologue on that video in one take. That was
one take?
Yeah, that was just all off the cuff.
Voiceover people. You gotta watch this video. We're gonna put the link to the video in description, but anyone out there looking for people to do voiceover work, he sounds like a professional documentary, legit voice. Have you heard it, Jim? He's got that nice bass. Oh, choir. Were you the bass?
I was a bass, yeah.
In choir. And that was really impressive. That was one take. Wow.
Thank you. I mean, it just shows it's authentic. It was from the heart, and just talking about the mental health aspects of motorcycling and the connection among veterans.
This is what you said about the writing. You said, when I'm on these roads with these people, I feel closer to God than I ever have in my entire life. And that is, wow, that's impactful.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. That's, you're surrounded by people that you understand, that understand you, that you can talk to in a certain way, that you can't talk to other people in the same way.
Because they don't have that experience.
Right. Exactly. There's empathy that's like close to empathy,
yes.
And then there's real empathy.
That only happens, right, if you've...
Right.
And that's why I think the support groups are so important, because you're gathering, very consciously with people who have that same exact experience. Right. I almost feel like, I don't know, Jim, if you ever feel this, but whenever I'm around veterans who've seen combat, right, real combat, been shot at, lost friends, I feel like I need to be really careful about trying to speak about that experience, because I really don't know. I don't think I ever will. And I even have, and maybe this is extreme, but I don't know if you guys, but it bothers me sometimes when you're watching, like, you hear this a lot in football, and I know that it's just a figure of speech, but they're like, yeah, man, I love going to war with these guys every day on the field. I don't know, it bothers me a little bit, because I'm like, there's got to be a better way to say that. Because if I were a veteran and you tried to compare a football game to what I went through, I don't know if I would take that well. Do you, or is that just people who take themselves too seriously? I mean, what do you think?
Again, it boils down to the individual.
Yeah.
It wouldn't bother me to hear that, because I've been a football player and I know what it feels like to go to war as a football player. But I could definitely see people that would get a little hurt about that,
Yeah. Well, I mean, but I do kind of see, maybe, I don't know, because you did both, but in football you kind of have each other's back. It's a very physical sport, and if someone doesn't have your back, in some cases you can get really hurt. Yeah. So I guess I can see that a little bit. But at the same time, again, I don't like to speak loosely about an experience that I will never understand fully, because I didn't go through it.
Right. I respect and appreciate what you're saying there. I think most veterans would.
Well, and I think, growing up around my father, I think, was a part of it too. And actually, all my stepfathers as well all served, and they've all had their different experience. My stepfather, John Nimmons, he went to was it Iraq? Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, my mom. His pictures. Was it Iraq? Saddam Hussein. They entered his.
That's when we took him out.
Is that okay? Yeah. He was the Coast Guard, and they had some boats in that area, and I remember him getting off and taking a picture with his old statue. He had is that kind of the same area where you guys?
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So you get out, you go through your experience, and then you decide. And this is a step that I'm really impressed by, and that I think distinguishes people from those who don't. You go through something, right? And you realize how difficult that was. And your first instinct is to say, how can I take what I just went through and help somebody else? Where most people will say, oh man, I'm glad I got through that. Okay, let me go party and live my life and, enjoy. And you're like, no, this is something that I went through, and I was blessed to not escape it, but survive it. And now I want to go and share that. And I believe that's kind of what the foundation's about, correct?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to put it.
This is all about keeping veterans alive on American soil. So talk a little bit about the Warriors of the Wind and how that came to be.
Well, it's all happened very quickly. And what you referenced earlier about the 5 different projects with podcasting and YouTube, it's all interwoven. And as I shared with you guys when I first got here, it's basically, as funny as it sounds, I'm dead serious, that Warriors of the Wind Foundation has basically been a series of dares that have resulted in a foundation to make a mini-series. And I'll just go through it really quick because I've shared this so many times, I'm sure people are getting tired of hearing it, but I'm in a photographer's basement dropping off some underwater gear, and his basement's an echo chamber. And he and I used to work together in an office environment at an engineering firm. And he said, did you know for the first 2 years I worked with you, I thought you were faking your voice? And I'm like, huh? And he said, dude, I'm serious. Like, it didn't match you, because I looked a lot younger back then. This is 18, 20 years ago. However long it's been now. And
were you like Rick Astley? Do you remember Rick Astley?
I have no idea.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about, Jim? Okay, Rick Astley. So he had this song, and again, this is pre-internet, right? So he had this song on the radio, and he had a real deep, soulful voice, right? You want to hear it? We're no strangers to love. You know the rules. And do you remember that song? You remember that one?
I'm gonna have to look this up.
Yeah, I probably butchered it.
The Rick Roll?
Yeah, the Rick Roll.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So he has this deep, soulful voice, right? But all you're hearing is on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So then finally, when the MTV music video comes out a couple months later, right, you had this picture of who Rick was going to be, and he's this thin little.
He looks like Connor. Oh, what's that talk show guy?
He looks like Conan O'Brien.
Conan O'Brien, yes.
Thin little English British guy,
redhead
right?
White boy.
Conan O'Brien has the right voice for Conan O'Brien.
Yeah.
I can't imagine
Rick Astley, right? And so I was to me, he's always been like that, defining like the guy whose voice doesn't match what he looks like.
Yeah.
And that's who you were.
Well, apparently, I mean, I just looked younger than now I'm all weathered from, being not wearing enough sunscreen or whatever on a motorcycle 4 hours a day or whatever. But, so he just basically says, look, dude, like, you've got this voice, you're not using it, and you should be. Like, you could make a lot of money with this voice. And I'm like, whatever, I just told him, I probably flipped him off and just kind of, at a minimum, I gaffed him off. He's like, dude, I'm dead serious. Like, you've got a really good voice. And he's a really good social media guy. He's an amazing photographer. Good friend of mine, Richwell Correa. Hello there. Keep doing what you do, brother. But when he told me that, it took me back to a lot of other people telling me you belong on the radio, and I always gaff them off too. I'm like, yeah, whatever, But him saying it carried different weight because I respected, his creativity and his, the things he's accomplished over the years.
Yeah.
Everything. I've known him for a long time, and so he dares me to make a YouTube channel and talk on it. I'm like, okay, what do I talk about? Talk about what you know. I'm like, I don't know anything, And so we kind of go back and forth, and I'm basically just arguing with him. And he's like, dude, I'm dead serious. Just do it. Like, give it a shot. See if it works for you. So I said, okay, what do I call it? Dallas the Voice is what he says. And I'm like, what? Like, I won't tell you what I actually said to him, but it was kind of like flipping him off, except for maybe a little worse. But like, I'm like, Dallas the Voice. Yeah, that doesn't sound pretentious, or,
Yeah.
I just laughed about it. And he kind of just starts laughing. He's like, just think it over. And I'm like, fine. I walk out, I'm actually kind of like irritated about it when I'm walking out. I remember that. And so I'm driving back to my house, and I'm just really thinking about what he said, and I'm like, all right. So I get back to the house, and I started getting on YouTube and checking for websites and stuff. And fast forward a few weeks, and I've thought about 50 other things I can call it, and none of them worked as well as that did.
Yeah.
So I bought DallasTheVoice.com, YouTube.com, Dallas The Voice, da-da-da. And so I start this YouTube channel, and what I talk about is veterans issues, because that's the one thing I can actually speak intelligently about.
Yeah.
And so...
well qualified for that.
well, I had my journey with it, and I could speak honestly, and, I knew I could help people because I could at least spare them the pain that I went through by giving them some shortcuts.
Yeah.
And so I started reading this book. Dan, I'm going to plug your book again. Dan Sheehan wrote a book called After Action, and he's a Cobra pilot that I served with. He was there for the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And
you served with him?
Yeah.
Wow. Dan Sheehan?
Dan Sheehan.
And the book's called?
After Action.
Viewers, After Action, we'll put the link to that book as well in the description.
Please do. Great book. I read this book, and it filled so many gaps for me about the things that I was going through that I couldn't explain. The sleep stuff, the anxiety stuff, whatever labels you want to slap on it, it's the same basic problems that veterans are dealing with in their own ways. And that book just did a really good job of bringing it down to a level I could understand it, I guess. And when I read it, it solved enough problems for me with those gaps that I went, I want my Marines to read this, but I have no authority to tell them what to do anymore. So I'm like, what can I do? Well, I'm riding motorcycles now. I can make a video and do a voiceover of this book. So I got his permission to read it. So that's what really started happening on my YouTube
I want to see
channel.
that video.
So I made 4 chapters of it, and the problem, as you guys have figured out, is YouTube analytics don't lie. And what I was finding was I was spending like 20, 22, 24 hours making one chapter of this book and getting like 15 views. And I'm like, I don't know if this is worth my time right now. So I may go back and revisit it at some point, but I talked to him about it, and he said, whatever you want to do is fine. But that's how it started. So I started doing these voiceover videos of motorcycle stuff, motorcycle footage with whatever I wanted to say over top of it. And then I also started incorporating something called binaural beats, which, if you're not familiar, it's a sound, you'll appreciate this. It's a sound technology that you've got a frequency in this ear, and then you've got a different frequency in this ear. And they're like 5 hertz different, 5, 6, somewhere 5 to 10 hertz, let's say. And what happens is it's kind of like this weird humming sound in your ear, and your brain tries to make those 2 frequencies the same. And in doing so, it creates new neural pathways that actually balance out your brain. And in the process of doing that, it can actually heal your brain from trauma.
What?
So
Wait, what is this called again?
Binaural beats.
Look this up, guys. Binaural beats can heal trauma.
Yeah. I'm
doing this.
So the way I learned about this to start with, and the reason I started basically stealing the technology I had learned about, it's common knowledge now, but you can buy soundtracks all over the place now. But I bought a program for meditation called the Holosync solution, which was put on by Centerpoint Research Institute, And you basically just sit there and you listen to these really calming soundtracks, and your brain, you feel different after half an hour of sitting there. And it's not like just a relaxed feeling. It's like something tangible. It's really hard to explain unless you've experienced it. But
how long would I have to listen to start to?
So with that program in particular, you start out at half an hour, and it just picture like raindrops falling, or like these, like the glass drums, like the kind of tonality, real calming.
Yeah.
There's a common, I can't remember the name of the drum, but it's half an hour to an hour to answer your question. So it's either 1 track or 2 tracks, and I was doing it to where I was doing it an hour every day religiously. And that was when I was going through a lot of stressful stuff, like with schooling and things like that. And that was my outlet, was just kind of.
And it worked for you.
It worked really well. So when I started making these videos talking about combat trauma recovery, I'm like, why not incorporate what I learned from this meditation program? So these binaural beats, you don't necessarily have to really hear them. You can put them as an undertone to any other music you want to, or speaking you want to. So your brain's still going to hear it, even if your ears don't. So it can be real subtle, but the technology's still doing what it's supposed to.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. It's something
You heard of this, Jim? Wow.
You're going to geek out on this stuff when you learn about it.
We're going to try this.
No, but it seems very experimental. I mean, obviously there's no harm behind it.
This program also put out a book called Thresholds of the Mind, written by Bill Harris. And he talks about all the research that went into it. He was this, deep meditator, yogi, he's got a lot of, he's passed away now, but they actually do brain scans that show before, during, and after the meditation program. And it shows the brain normalizing. It balances the brain out. And you can see
and
the color
the imbalance
charts.
starts from what?
Trauma, hormonal imbalances. I'm sure there's all sorts of reasons for it. I can't speak intelligently about that. All I know is before the meditation and after are two different things, and it's noticeable when you really look at the color thermal imaging or whatever.
You might have just changed my whole life here on camera.
Maybe so.
I'm serious.
Maybe so.
Like
it changed mine.
And here's the thing about trauma, and Jim, you can chime in on this as well. I feel like it's all in how we interpret what's happened, right? Because I study siblings a lot, right? Because I'm a teacher, and so I'm like, okay, this brother and sister, I can see some trauma playing out in the classroom. Brothers handling a lot better than sister, or sister than brother, right? And I always question, like, if they were raised under the same environment and were exposed to the same traumatic events, it's just a different interpretation of that. And I've always been like fascinated by this idea that I can have 2 or 3 siblings all go raised by the same parents, and one has completely overcome the trauma while the other's still living in it. Mm-hmm.
It's funny you say that, because it is not what I'm going to say it is, but it's almost like a game. You sit there and you watch these students, because we're both educators, and you'll sit and watch their habits, and you'll see, like, it's not the kid. There's a reason why the student is acting up the way they are, he or she is. There's a reason why they come to class and they're cut off on what you're trying to lecture, or they're engaged. I've had the reverse role of where I've seen a student where I know is like, this kid comes from a broken home. I already know this and stuff, but they're so engaged in my program that I'm like, it makes me seem, it puts me on a pedestal, because I'm like, this kid is like focused on everything I say. And then you're like, how could this be? I would be a wreck, if I know what I've heard about the student. And so it's interesting that you say that, because sometimes I'll look at it and be like, that's well. And sometimes I ask, you're like, hey, what are you guys doing this, holiday season? Oh yeah, we're just gonna chill at my grandma's or whatever. Oh, are your parents, separated? And you start to see. Yeah, I live with my mom, and my siblings live with my dad, and you could actually become a therapist and not be a therapist, and you could see all these things happening, and you're like, okay, now I understand. You could start understanding why they act up the way they do, why they whatever it is. So,
and then you have some that have every reason to act up, and they don't, and you're like, wow, the way this was interpreted by this student was a lot more effective in overcoming that. And again, you said it too, like when I talked about live combat, and the reaction, you said, hey, everybody's different. We're all being exposed to this same really life or death environment, but we're all responding differently.
Right.
And I think, you starting this foundation, I'm sure you're, as you're getting veterans who participate in your foundation, your program, you're starting to see different responses.
It's been incredible, to be honest with you. Like, I started this with a basic idea, and essentially, at its I guess the root of all this for me, I was kind of trying to duplicate the experiences that I've had that got me out of a funk, more or less. I was trying to give that gift to other people.
Yeah, that's
And when
a
I say
beautiful
give
thing.
that gift, what I mean is literally when I started that YouTube channel, my goal was to monetize it to a point where I could buy a motorcycle and give it away to somebody that I knew was struggling, to watch them go through the same journey that I had,
Yeah.
and hopefully help them in the same ways that it helped me.
Why a motorcycle?
Because, dude, I I spoke earlier about Okinawa and the things I was doing over there. Scuba diving was a huge mindfulness activity for me. Traveling, same thing. Australia, getting out in nature, watching kangaroos beat the crap out of each other.
That's cool.
Like adventure, travel, photography, all these things are mindfulness activities. And that's been a really big part of my journey, is chasing mindfulness from one activity to another. And the one that by far trumps everything else for me is motorcycling. You never know what's around the next bend.
Yeah.
You're in control of your own destiny. There's all these different facets of it.
Jim, you said something. You said the feeling of the bike underneath you.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like you can feel the road better, or
It's just, you're not in a car. You're not sitting in a box. You're out of the box. You're literally
in the wind?
in the. It's and that's kind of the metaphor behind it. But it's literally the feeling of the bike maneuvering the road and crossing over, and then just. I mean, and to some degree, because this is scary, just knowing that you're literally inches from death in some degree.
That
I mean,
doesn't sound
true to
but
that.
it is some kind of like excitement of knowing that you're free. It's like you're not. I would imagine someone that would probably hang glide or parachute or would have the same type of adrenaline, and it is, not that you need to go fast or whatever, but yeah, it is a, it's a high. It is kind of like a high.
Definitely.
Yeah.
natural high.
So, yeah.
And just speaking of that, I'm definitely an adrenaline junkie. And that's been part of my mindfulness stuff too, is, I've done the skydiving, bungee jumping, shark diving, all that
Skydiving,
kind of
oh my.
stuff.
Wait, what'd you say about sharks?
I love sharks.
Oh
Shark
my
diving used to be my big thing.
So how does
until-
shark diving? In the cage, or how does that work?
Out of the cage. No, I never did cage diving.
Do you just like hope they're well fed, or how does this work? I mean, because
we
you're
have an
there, they're
understanding.
there.
We have an understanding, me and the sharks.
Oh, I want to be with you.
He's all
if I ever see
he's
a
all
shark.
petting them and everything. It's
I
like, geez.
know. Me and the shark.
Dude, I don't know. Some people are just born this way. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh,
I'm
my
not saying
God.
it makes sense.
I will tell you the closest I ever got to that was my brother went to Hawaii for a convention. Tony Robbins.
You say swimming with the dolphins. That has nothing to
No,
compare
no.
to that.
no. Here's was my thought, and it wasn't sharks or dolphins or anything, but so they said go out to Cook Island because that's where the best snorkeling is, right? Because I like to snorkel. And I said, well, how do I get out there? And said, well, the cheapest way is to rent a kayak. So it's me by myself with the kayak, and I'm heading out to this island, which I don't know. You can see it from the shore, but a mile or two. And I fell out. I flipped over. I don't remember how I fell out. Or no, I think I jumped in on purpose because I could see like a school of dolphins like coming my way, and then they went underwater, and I was like, maybe I can hear them if I go under. I don't know where I got that idea, but I remember jumping out and going underneath, and I don't know if it was just my own whatever, but I could hear the little squealing, and it was about 15 of them with the little babies all moving in a school. And what kind of scared me in that moment is I looked all around me and the scuba diving, how big and vast it is, right? And then I started thinking about all the other things that could be in the water. And I'm crawling back up.
That'll get you every time, that thought.
I had a peaceful moment that I scared myself, but I remember jumping back on, and it's just this idea that kind of like that same sort of adrenaline where like, hey, anything can be here at any time, and hopefully it's peaceful, and if it's not, you got to be about your wits. And the only thing I know about sharks is like they said, Jim, have you heard this one? Like you're supposed to bump them in the nose
Well,
for survival.
so like you take a great white shark, tiger shark, they've got something called the ampullae of Lorenzini. They've got these receptors on the end of their snout, basically, that puts them in a catatonic state.
Oh,
So if you
so
go
that's
on
how you-
TikTok and stuff, these shark whisperers. They'll have the sharks coming up to them, and they just tap their underneath
It's
their nose.
just a love tap, like
more or less. And once you touch that, it short circuits their brain, and then
Oh.
you can like maneuver them however you want to, in theory. But good luck if you get one with a sinus infection, you might get eaten. You know,
oh my God.
so I wouldn't go.
But you like swimming with the sharks.
Yeah, I mean I do.
Oh my God.
Well, so the way that started was I went out surfing on Camp Pendleton, and I was by myself, private beach, and it was like a quarter mile from where I lived in officer housing. And I'm out there, not a soul in sight, and I've got this surfboard I bought off a Bell Tech Rep. And anyway, I don't know how to surf. I'm terrified of sharks, and I'm out there on the surfboard surfing badly. I don't even know if I even stood up on the thing, but in my periphery, I see a shark fin as I'm trying to get up on the surfboard.
Oh my.
And I walked on water that day, and so I'm hauling butt back to the shore, and I look back and I realize in my embarrassment, even though nobody could see it but me, that it was a sailboat
Oh.
that I saw and turned in my brain into a shark fin. I was so angry with myself. I'm like, I'm going to dive with sharks.
Oh, to just overcome that.
That was like, I got to get scuba diving certified. I got to go become a shark diver. So that was the moment that I decided to do that.
I like the way your brain works. If something really scares me, I'm running right at it.
That's definitely
That's
big.
living. Okay, so speaking of running right at it, you eventually evolve into a foundation, and you made a bold statement to me on that call about your suicide prevention goal. Can you share that publicly with us?
My belief, and I could not be more serious when I say this, and I realize it's a lofty goal, and that is the entire point, because why wouldn't we set a lofty goal in something so doggone important? If I can get these miniseries to take at the level I know it can with the right support, whether it's corporate, film studios, whatever the case may be, I truly believe we can reduce military suicides by half.
Half.
50%.
You heard it here first, folks. Reduced by half. There's got to be someone out there who's willing to take this on. This is too important. This needs to happen. So share briefly. Let's say that you ever heard of an elevator pitch?
Yeah.
We're in the elevator right now, and you've got some viewers. What is it exactly, this series, and how would it affect people?
Well, it's a lot of different things at once. I call it a docu-series in motion. In motion is kind of literal and figurative at the same time. Figuratively, we don't know exactly how it's going to unfold. It's got I've got a premise of connecting veterans through motorcycle culture by way of starting to build a platoon across the country, 50 states, 50 motorcyclists, trying to do it in such a way where they're within riding distance of other veterans in their areas, and essentially building up one platoon at a time. There's a number of ways we can do this, but essentially these veterans are going to spend time together. They're going to ride together. They're going to ride separately. They're also going to be researching veteran service organizations in their areas. They're going to connect with churches, other motorcycle clubs and associations, and they're going to be seeking out veterans that are struggling with that specific goal. Not to mention the fact that a lot of these guys, I mean, the goal is to bring people in who are overcoming their own mental health journey, like I did.
So you're creating a community.
I'm creating a community, yeah.
A community that helps
and
people
a culture and a spider web of good is what I keep kind of landing
Spider
on
web
in my
of
own
good.
brain.
No, I like that.
A spider web of good that's going to grow and develop however it unfolds. But the idea here is nobody, I say this a lot, no one can possibly understand veterans the way that we do. We expect, and this is where veterans fall short. I'll tell you, like, I'm going to say something not popular, and that's fine by me. I don't care. Veterans do not do a good job of taking care of each other to the level that we should, in my opinion.
Would I be fair to say, though, is do they know how?
That's absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, you're absolutely fair in saying that. And no, I don't think we do, a lot of us.
But
I
this
think
series would educate them on
this
that
series
process.
is designed to educate.
I want to see that. And how far in are you with the series?
At
right
this
now,
point,
currently?
I'm 3 filming sessions in. I do have a professional cinematographer doing this for us, and I'm also providing my own footage as a fellow filmmaker. He's more accomplished than I am. by far, but I'm trying to help him out a little bit. The idea here is showing each other how we heal together. So me sharing my journey, just like I'm sharing right here with you, you know, I see you giving me certain looks and I'm giving you the same thing in return.
Yeah.
Like you talked about losing somebody. I talk about losing, you know, we have this connection.
I'm healing right now. I mean,
Yeah.
just talking.
Yeah. And so, you know, so going back to what we talked about on the card ride up here over the phone, I've selected my first warrior of the wind. I need to source him a motorcycle. That's the number one thing I need right now to finish the miniseries pilot. Once I have a motorcycle for him, his job starts because he's got to start earning that motorcycle by way of making his own videos talking about his journey. So I've already podcasted with this gentleman. His name's James. We gave him the road name Beta because he's our test bed. So he's our beta testing for Warriors of the Wind. So basically, when I met James, he had been isolating for the better part of 4 decades. He has ridden a motorcycle before, but he hadn't been on one in 25 years. And I met him during a veteran service project, moving some boxes around so we could fumigate his apartment. He was very limited in his mobility. He had been depressed for a long time. I had an hour-long podcast about this very thing with him, and he shared all this, so I'm not sharing anything he didn't share publicly himself.
Yeah.
But basically, he had survivor's guilt. He had swapped duties with somebody, and in doing so, that individual ended up on a flight deck and ended up getting killed. And so he blames himself for that happening, even though there's no way he ever could have known. It happened the way it happened, but psychologically it damaged him in a very real and tangible way, and he's still working through that, you know, decades later. But what I found with it was I met him about coming up on 5 months ago now, and I've got video the first day we met. I podcasted with him. We've gone on a couple of different events together, and I've watched this guy heal, not only mentally, but physically. Just by coming out of his depression, he was barely able to move with a walker when I met him. And like, he was really struggling to get around. And now I see him, he's walking, he's happy. He's going out in crowds. He's hanging out with a bunch of bikers and veterans, and like, he's conversational. He's joking. He said his life's totally different over the course of just a few months. He's not even on a bike yet.
Oh.
And that's just by reconnecting with other veterans. He hadn't done that. And it happened kind of inadvertently, but it just so happens that it happened at a time where I'm getting this mini series going and I've got this foundation happening. And
Yeah.
you know,
The
stars aligned.
And I truly believe that happens when you've got something that you're trying to do for the betterment
Right.
of all.
Right.
And I think that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, I've got a couple of dots that I'm connecting as we're speaking that I'm going to be sharing with you later. But I think this is an amazing endeavor. I really think that this is going to take off and that it's going to help a lot of people. And more importantly, it's going to save lives.
I know it's already saved some. What happens is people tell me after the fact.
Yeah.
I've been on, so I've kind of avoided your question unintentionally. The YouTube channel, next thing you know, I'm in San Francisco hanging out with, technically Pacifica, hanging out with one of the sergeants, the Marine Corps sergeants that I deployed with back in 2003. He's a YouTuber. We connect randomly after 20 years of not seeing each other. Next thing you know, he's daring me to make a documentary because he sees my passion for helping veterans. He sees this YouTube channel, all the time and effort I'm putting into it. He's like, he gets all serious with me. Hey, sir, you ever thought about making a documentary? I look at him like, you out of your friggin' mind? He's like, no, I'm serious. I'm like, oh, gee, that's how I started with a YouTube channel. He's like, no, I'm serious. I'm like, all right. Next thing you know, he's pulling up Angel Studios, showing me how to put together a torch for Angel Studios. So it's a 5 to 20 minute film you submit for funding. Anybody can do it. You're guaranteed like 40, 50,000 viewers.
You submitted to Angel Studios?
Yeah.
Wow.
So next thing you know, I'm saying yes to another dare. Hey, let's make a documentary.
So
like,
once that's done, that will be submitted, or that's already been submitted to them?
So it started as a documentary. then I started thinking, I think it'd be a better movie, and then it went back and forth 100 different ways. In preparation for making what I thought was going to be a movie, I talked to a lot of veterans at VFW halls and bars, you name it. Anytime I had some time with FaceTime with a veteran or on the phone, Zoom calls, I was asking the same basic questions, and I kept landing on the same basic answers. The contributing factors to suicidal ideations. Why are you wanting to kill yourself? Why are you having these thoughts? Because I'm really frustrated all the time. Because I'm sad and I can't shake it. Because I'm embarrassed that I can't tell my wife that I'm having these problems because she'll leave me. Because I'll get made fun of. I was this, real tough guy that everybody respected. All of a sudden, they're going to look at me and think I'm weak. All these psychological barriers, all these, this demonization of PTSD, the stigmatization of what happens to a veteran when they come home from war. I'm seeing all these themes unfold as I'm interviewing these people, and I'm like, the best way to document this dare, this dare that I've been given, is through a miniseries, because the autobiographical model of this is where people are going to heal the most. They're going to see other people. So you got the guy depressed, sitting there with a remote in one hand and a beer in the other, hating his life, flipping the channels. He's going to land on this miniseries where people are talking about, this is how I heal. This is how I get mindfulness. I go out and scuba dive with sharks, or maybe it's I go out and ride a motorcycle. Maybe it's woodworking. Maybe it's reading, writing, painting. We're going to be capturing all these things at once, and that's why I call it a docuseries in motion, because the motorcycling is one component of it, and it's a very important component of it, but it's not about motorcycling. It's about human connection. Motorcycles just provide adventure and a scenic backdrop and a way to connect.
It's the tool.
Because, like we talked about, the similarities, and you know this too, the military precision of riding in formation. You get a group ride, like when Sarah and I met for the first time, we went on a group ride with 400 veterans. 400
Wow.
motorcycles. I've got a picture of it I can show you, and video. Actually, the one I was just saying, the 7-minute video I was saying,
Yes.
that was this year's version of what we did last year. So we had 300, the one you saw today, roughly. But just that snap pop precision, I call it in that video, like
pop.
the silent drill platoon, close order drill is something we do a lot of, especially in the Marine Corps, because we're the best at it, if I may say so, which I do. But, all that click and pop and, throwing your rifles around, all that stuff, like you'd see the same basic feel on a motorcycle in a big group like that. And in a group like that, it's literally saving your life. Hand and arm signals. Okay, we're going right. Slow down, pothole, all that kind of stuff.
How do you decide who's going to lead the pack? How does that work?
In my case, I put on a bear suit.
Oh, so you were leading the pack.
That's an inside joke. Anyway. But
in the bear suit.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because, and you have to have ridden, because when I started riding, and I don't have a bike anymore, but I miss it, is when you're riding by yourself, it's one thing. But as soon as, even if you ride up next to another biker who's a stranger on the road, there's a click.
Absolutely.
You literally bond within seconds of riding up next to them at a streetlight. And then when you leave together, you're a unit. And you literally now add 300 of those bikes, add 20, whatever it is. And I did a couple rides up to Sierra Summit back in the day at China Peak when they did Rumble to the Summit. They did a lot of things for Make-A-Wish program.
I see a lot of rides on Facebook.
and that was huge, seeing thousands of these riders going up there. And you could have everybody from a lawyer to a doctor to a mechanic to a veteran, anybody in this, and it didn't matter. You're a biker that day and you're a biker that minute. And it's the weirdest feeling, because you almost get a sense of goodbye-ness when they veer off.
Yeah.
And now you're alone again. And now, which is fine, but then you feel I wouldn't say tougher, but you just feel as a unit when you're next to another biker. And again, you don't even know who this person is. And alone, these guys that are all together and they're sharing their stories. So
did you ever pair up with somebody and last like a significant amount of time?
It's almost code. It's almost code, and it's literally you pull up to a biker. Now, I'm going to say this softly because it's the type of bike you ride too that determines on who you're going to ride next to.
Oh,
Some people don't prefer to have cruisers next to the crotch rockets or the fast bikes.
Those people are tool
They're
bags.
different. They're different riders. So
the Harley and what was that? The other Indian.
Yeah, I mean, we can go so many different directions with this. You got the guys that are obsessed with this one particular brand, regardless of what brand it is.
Yeah.
And there are people that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt what you're saying. But, maybe it's just the style of bike they ride. It's a bigger one with a windshield or whatever versus a crotch rocket. To me, I don't care what they ride as long as they're riding, they're out there. I'm like, hey, what's up, dude? But
and that's the true nature of a real rider because you wouldn't care as long as you're just driving a Toyota to a Chevy. You're still on the road,
Yeah.
So
I mean, if I got a person on a big giant motorcycle with a certain brand associated with it that I won't say out loud, and I'm on a crotch rocket, if they start acting that way, I'd be like, I know I'm going to be faster than you, so go I'll just zoom off. It's fine. But no, I think that's stuff's so silly. The whole brand one is better than the other thing. It's just kind of goofy. That is a lot of culture.
Yeah,
contributes to that.
But my point though is when if you truly love to ride, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But you could pull up next to somebody and you become a unit, and it literally feels as though you're
part of something.
Yeah,
You're not alone.
Yeah, and it proves
it's
his
bigger
point.
than you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
you just kind of made my brain go a little funky there in a good way. It's bigger than you. So I recently put out a post somewhere on social media where I was talking about some of my own journey with mental health, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And I was just talking about, for me, getting back into my faith was a big thing. And I said, for me, it's my faith. For you, maybe it's the Grand Canyon. Anything that's bigger than you is going to help you, kind of take you out of your own mental construct a little bit, or your cage, or whatever you want to call it, prison sometimes. And I think, what you're saying, like the group mentality in a good way. It takes you out of your own. Well, I actually podcasted with a recon Marine not too long ago. He talked about the prison of your own mind, and I think
that's a great way
really
to put
well
it.
stated.
Yeah. And
He's a very,
sometimes,
very articulate guy.
I think the scariest part is sometimes people don't even realize they're in a prison.
That was me. I'll tell you right now, I was depressed and I didn't even know it for a long time.
When did you find? What was the eye-opening moment or experience?
There were a few of them. I will tell you, there were a couple of Marines that I lost kind of back to back. And I was also going through some other personal things to where, like, my brain just snapped a couple times. Not like I wasn't a risk to anybody, but just I was very angry. And thankfully I was by myself and whatever. But what was your question? Sorry, you just put me in a whole different state of mind when you asked that.
I was saying, how you said that sometimes that you were a person who didn't realize that he was a prisoner in his own mind. At some point, though, you became aware of it. What was the incident that created that awareness?
There's been a couple of people that pointed it out to me, for one thing. You kind of get in these rhythms in your life. You get up, you put your slippers on, whatever the case may be, that kind of stuff. And you'll miss out on certain behaviors. You kind of lose self-awareness sometimes.
Yeah.
And what I lost touch with, I think, was my own happiness. I think I just kept on deprioritizing my own happiness because I was trying to fit within a certain construct, which I can't really elaborate on some of those things. But I was living for other people. I wasn't living for me.
Yeah.
And
I think that's also like a kind of a father thing that happens sometimes, right? When you're the head of a household or family, or even trying to be a dutiful husband.
Right.
You kind of sometimes, if you're not careful, you lose a little bit of yourself, that it ends up hurting the larger unit.
Right.
Right.
I think it's extremely important for mental health across the board that I think everybody needs to keep some level of integrity to their own heart, their own personal ambitions and goals on some level. I mean, obviously, when you're a parent, you have to sideline some of that, or at least maybe slow down a little bit. That goes without saying. But at the same time, like, you can't completely let yourself not do the things that give you joy.
That's a great way to put it. I feel like, and Jim, I don't know, you can speak to this one as well. When you first have children, right, and you're learning how to balance that. Some people fall into this thing where it's all about the kids all the time, and you kind of lose who you are. So when the kids leave, you're like, oh wait, who am I again? Because if I'm not dad today, in the same way I was for the last 18 years, then who am I? What do I do now? I feel like this has kind of helped with that, Jim. The podcast and pursuing the YouTube stuff. It's like Roblive, Chances Are Productions. We have our thing, right, outside of our role as family men, which we really cherish and take seriously. But I have some friends. I had a friend tell me once, and it made me really sad when he said it. He says, after the kids move out, I don't know if me and my wife are going to last much longer. And I said, well, what would that have to do with the kids? He says, because everything has become about them. We're there for them 24/7, and we haven't made any time for us to continue to grow as a couple. And so they have become the only thing we have in common. So when they leave, what's left of us?
It definitely happens.
And I was like, wow, wow. Okay, so now you're on your third episode, you said?
Yeah, so the third, what I'm calling our first, basically filming the pilot.
Yes.
We've done 3 filming sessions for the pilot. I believe we have 2 more left.
Okay.
And basically the missing component of that is getting James a motorcycle.
Can we help get James a motorcycle? Does it matter what James?
Ideally, it's going to be something a little beefier that he's got. It's got some substance to it. So like a bagger, cruiser.
So let's go pipe dream, right? Let's call it out. You play big, right? Who do we want to talk to? Harley? Who we asking out here who might be watching?
Well, I know. I'll speak for James on this one.
Yeah, James. Where's
James
James
was in a motorcycle shop not too awful long ago, and he sat on an Indian bagger. He was quite fond.
Indian bagger.
It was an Indian bagger. So larger bike. For a used one, we're probably talking 15, somewhere around 15 grand.
Okay. Anyone out there has an Indian bagger that they want to sell or maybe donate or needs a write-off at the end of the year, we have someone you can reach out to. We're going to have the foundation website. We're going to have links to all the things that Dallas is working on. Also, some of the books he named as well. We're going to have a plethora. Ooh, I said plethora.
Ooh, that's
I've been trying to say that for a while. I finally have a reason of resources for you guys to get connected. But I know there are people out there who want to help, and we want to reach out to them. Viewers, you guys as well. You guys ever heard of 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yeah.
You know that one? So the concept, viewers, is that everyone, Kevin Bacon has done so many movies, and he's been part of so many things in the entertainment industry since like, I don't know, the 80s, Footloose, right? So you can work down the degrees of separation between him and almost every other actor in the industry. He worked with Robert De Niro, and Robert De Niro has worked with, so-and-so. So I believe those 6 degrees of separation also exist within us as individuals.
Absolutely.
And, we all, as 3, have resources. But you viewers out there, I want you guys to really look into who you have in your life that could help make something like this very possible. And what we're talking about more than anything else, make no mistake, we're talking about saving lives. So if you want to help out Warriors of the Wind, did I say that correctly?
Yes, sir.
Warriors of the Wind, to save lives for veterans who are struggling, men and women who have served our country, who have made the ultimate sacrifice, are now losing their lives, and we need to help them. So if you want to be a part of this, reach out. The links are there. If you don't have the resources, I know you know somebody out there. If you have someone in the entertainment industry who may want to help us get this piloted and out there on national television, we'd love to have that. If you have individuals who have resources who maybe want to get write-offs for their large corporations, we could use some motorcycles. If you have anyone in the, as we know, it's not always, what we do. It's who we know. I think I screwed that one up, but you guys know what I'm saying.
I got what you meant.
So whoever you know out there, Roblivers, please reach out and help us. We need you right now. So Dallas, I want to thank you very much for being here today. I think this is one of many conversations we're going to have. I look forward to this and our friendship. I feel like
Absolutely.
we're becoming friends now, right?
Absolutely.
Are we friends yet?
I think I hugged you downstairs. So.
Jim, we got a new friend.
Is it too late for me to add a couple points?
Absolutely not.
If you need to wrap up, I'll be quiet.
No, go ahead and let's get those points out.
So a couple things. I have actually reached out to a lot of celebrities at this point.
Oh, okay.
But I've done it by way of the recommendations of certain people on my board that are good at that sort of thing.
Marshall Mathers?
Eminem is one of those.
Eminem, you reached out to Eminem. Have you heard anything back from Eminem?
I have not.
Trying to hear from you.
And Sarah Kelly, I want them for the soundtrack. They've got one song that I've already got written in my head on some level. Keanu Reeves is one of the first ones I reached out to.
Yes.
Norman Reedus, who had a show called Ride with Norman Reedus.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty good.
You guys may not know Norman Reedus by his real name, but you definitely know him if you ever watched The Walking Dead.
Yes, sir.
He is, what's his character's name again?
I hated that show, to be honest.
Oh, what? I love that.
But I love Norman Reedus.
Daryl from The Walking Dead.
There you go.
With a crossbow. Daryl with the crossbow. If anyone knows him, 6
I don't
degrees.
like zombie movies, man. I'm sorry. But yeah, there's been a number of different people I've reached out to, not only in the celebrity world, but also, they're all kind of celebrities. There's also military, general types.
Yeah.
I've been connected with.
Well, let me encourage you on this, because I don't know how much you've delved into this, but if you say their name in the YouTube video, right, then the hashtag exists.
Right.
So we've said Keanu Reeves, we said Eminem, we said Sarah Kelly.
Sarah Kelly.
Let's go say some
I
names.
actually know her.
You
worked
know
with
her
a couple times.
That's awesome.
So she's a Christian artist, amazing voice. The voice of an angel, which is actually what I would have her doing in the song.
Okay.
But Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt.
Let's see, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, John Voight, Gene Simmons. Let's see, most recently, there's been a couple.
Gene Simmons of Kiss.
Yeah. He's very. So here's the deal. This is from a branding standpoint, from a sponsorship standpoint. I can't think of a much more America thing. Like I keep telling people, this is worth about 5 Super Bowl ads. The difference is instead of tying a yellow ribbon around a tree, we're actually saving lives by doing this. Like I know that to be true.
Yes.
So like it's one thing to have corporate social responsibility and a marketing image. It's another thing to actually be out there saving veterans. And I know this will accomplish that.
And I know that there's probably a lot of people with resources who want that. They want to have that impact. I will say from a nonprofit standpoint, when I talk to sponsors, donors, when we're writing grants, a lot of the concerns that we hear from those who have the resources is we want to be very intentional and investigate who we're giving our resources to, because we want to have real outcomes.
Absolutely.
We want to invest in things that matter. Those who are out there right now, this is it. You found the thing that matters. It's going to save lives. It's just a matter of whether you're going to be a part of it or not. And I hope you choose to be a part of this.
I'll tell you right now, the reason there is a Warriors the Win Foundation, other than a series of dares, is because I am tired of my heart breaking over losing Marines.
Amen.
This stuff keeps me up at night. I've have a couple people that can attest to the absolute fact. I can feel them coming now. I can feel suicides coming. And I've actually put a couple of things out on Facebook to where I felt something bad going on. And I found out the very next day that something bad had indeed gone down.
Oh.
I'll leave that word.
You're now in tune with this.
But yeah, I don't want to call it a sixth sense, but it's not far from it. It's just like this.
Oh, I truly believe in that.
It's nasty.
Well, let's take action. Let's take action. So I'm calling everybody out there. If you got some degree of connection to someone who can help, we're going to have the resources and connections. You're going to find everything you need in our description for this episode. And I want again, Dallas, I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for coming out here.
Thank you.
Jim, I can't say enough about what you've done with the studio. Every time we come out, there's something beautiful. We now have a wall of fame.
Yes. We'll add this picture on it too.
We're going to add it on there. So thank you guys. Viewers, hey, let's take some action. Let's help out. And until next time, this is Roblive with Jim Chance, our guest, Dallas Poore. As always, how we sign off. Love, peace, and chicken grease. We out.